What it says here? Why atheist ethics always collapse. J. Dyer explains the is-owed problem. Atheist is making fun of atheists.
The problem is that I'm not trying to be rude. I don't think you know what the Izot problem is. So I'm not even going to be able to have a fruitful conversation on that if you're not even aware of that stuff. So I have to restrain myself because people are just,
because I'm too. What is the Izot problem? You apparently want to have this conversation because you're sitting there talking shit about what I do or don't know. What is the Izot problem, big brains?
Well, I mean, you're the one that said there's no odds, so that tells me that you don't.
I don't understand what the Izot problem is, obviously. Why don't you explain it to me?
Hello, my name is Socrates Son. Today I will educate Dyer, who is I like him, who is a very good Christian apologist, about the is-owed question. You Christians, because you defeat theists, Islamists or Islam easily, and because atheists don't bother anymore, you think you win atheists. In fact, let me make that absolutely clear. You can defeat everyone in the world, but as long as I exist in this world, atheist wins, because no one of you can defeat me. Okay, so when I die, you might defeat atheism. As long as I am in this world, you will never defeat atheism. Okay, so let's go to the owed is question. What that means? Okay, let's say that we find the definition, we examine and find the true definition of morality. Okay, so I can make a secular definition of morality, and you can make a theistic definition of morality. Okay, and then let's say that we find out what is the true morality. That is a difficult task, but then we go to a more difficult task, which is, okay, now we know what is morality, why we ought to be moral. Okay, okay, now I know what is good. Why I ought to be good? Why I should be good? That's a very good question. What I wanted to say. Okay, so that is what he means by is owed. I wanted to say something. One moment, please. Okay. So let's let this guy explains what he want to say.
You can't get a moral normative claim and what you ought to believe if everything just is. And so this is a problem in philosophy because people have tried to give claims that are moral and binding when they have a metaphysic or a worldview, say materialism. I don't know if that's your view. You may not be a materialist, but if you're a materialist, for example, like say Sam Harris is, right, when he argues with Jordan Peterson, this comes up because Peterson says, well, you can't get an ought from an is, which is true. You can't get an ought from an is. So if everything just is, there's not a justification for saying that there ought to be an NAP or we ought not murder people or whatever. It's just an assertion with no justification.
So tearing the morality down, wouldn't that be kind of taking it back to kind of throwing off the religious concept? If you take the religion out, then we don't have that moral stance. We don't have that moral foundation and grounding and like, well, I know this is wrong because here I can show you why. So because
the ought question reflects the moral weight or urgency we feel in our bones when it comes to morality, unlike other fields of investigation. If I state, let's say now, guys, I make the statement, I don't ought to be moral. Wow. That sounds like a shocking statement. What? You don't owe to be moral? It sounds morally absurd. Okay, so it might be logical, it might be make sense logically, but morally it sounds absurd. Okay, if I make the statement, I don't owe to be moral, but at the same time I can make the statement, I don't owe to be 2 feet tall. If I make the statement, I don't owe to be 2 feet tall, nobody will have an issue with that. But if I say I don't owe to be moral, immediately you understand the moral weight, the moral urgency to one proposition in comparison to the other proposition. But from where we derive this moral weight or urgency? Is it because God said so? No. And we can prove it very easily. The moral urgency and weight, it derives from the real consequences of morality relating to suffering and well-being. For example, if God said, morality is in fact moral to abuse children for the fun of it. Now, do you have the urgency? Do you owe to abuse children for the fun of it? No. Even theists will not have this urgency, this oath. Will say, no, you must be wrong. God will never say that. So even theists in this case don't feel this urgency, don't feel this oath. Okay, but when God says something that reflects suffering and well-being, like I ought to not kill people, then you immediately understand this urgency, and then the oath question makes sense. So from where the oath question derives its moral weight and urgency? From the God commands? No, from the secular definition of morality related to suffering and well-being. Okay, Joe, what's your name? Dyer. Now you know, my friend. What I wanted to say. One second, guys. Now, I'm checking whether I have sound. So, now, if we assume a universe that it hasn't got consciousness as the center of reality, in other words, let's make a hypothesis, God doesn't exist. So consciousness is not at the center of reality. That is a hypothesis. Okay, let's say. Okay, then in this case, do we owe anything in an absolute sense? Oath necessarily requires consciousness. Okay, necessary. So, if there is no absolute consciousness, we don't owe anything in an absolute sense. Okay, so without God, we don't owe anything in an absolute sense. But because humans have consciousness, okay, and therefore they can experience suffering and well-being, morality gets its moral weight and urgency from this level, which this level can be objective. Okay, so for something to be objective, it only needs a fixed point of reference. Okay, everything can be objective as long as it has a fixed point of reference. let's say I define morality in the most absurd way. Morality is what devil believes. As long as I have this definition assuming to be true, and I have a fixed point of reference, then my morality can be objective, relating to this fixed point of reference, to the false definition of morality. So it's not about objectivity, it's about true definitions. Okay, so everything can be objective as long as you relate it to a fixed point of reference, even if that reference is not true. Okay, so if we assume a world that God doesn't exist, because there is no ultimate consciousness, we don't owe anything in an absolute sense. We are still owe things in an objective human sense. And owe, it's not a very accurate word. In fact, when I say owe, what I'm trying to express is the moral weight and urgency. Okay. Say, what's your name? Say Dyer. And now you know. Thank you very much, guys. Guys, I made a channel which I use Suno AI, and I post my Greek songs. I have like 100 songs. And not to lose them forever, because if I was waiting to make them properly, I would probably die. And I will still have 70 songs nobody would ever listen. So and therefore I post my songs with Suno AI to exist somewhere. So I will have the link in the description. If you can go and listen, it will be